Hello and welcome, my name is Trismegistus, and today we're going to be reading through and drowning in the latest Factorio Friday Facts. Friday Facts 430, Drowning in Fluids. Posted by Wagon. Hello, today we once again dive headfirst into the world of fluids. Since last time. Back in June, the very same week that we revealed Fluids 2.0, which was Friday Facts 416, we were undergoing an in-office LAN party to test the game. As we played, it became apparent that the new system was a little bit too easy. An Alvis base had ridiculously huge pipelines that snaked all over the place, with little to no thought or structure behind them. We did use some fluid trains to connect particularly distant outposts, but even this was mostly out of habit. A pipeline would have been superior. So if you're not familiar, Friday Facts 416 was where they revealed the new Fluids 2.0 system, where Wagon explained that basically he kind of ripped out the entire previous system and made it a lot more simple. It is based on everything essentially having a single fluid box that's connected together, so it all just sort of fills up at the same time, empties at the same time. People did point out some issues that I think are reflected in what they've said about, the LAN party. I guess I should also note this isn't the LAN party that I attended. This was way back before when they were obviously doing one of their in-house testing sessions and, trying to play the game, find out what it was like and how it played essentially. So this is not the one I went to. We then got a screen capture which is presumably from that LAN party, and the caption says, "Our infinite throughput continent spanning pipelines." So presumably these are basically just going everywhere, and they're essentially doing a fluid bus, so they are taking all of the fluids. We've got sulfuric acid, the two molten metals, petroleum, light oil and heavy oil, and presumably they're just routing these wherever they need fluids, and they're not bothering about distance and length or any of that stuff. We've also got water down here and oil, obviously, where they're doing the cracking. These are the full 16 beacon setups. So basically the point was that when they actually played with it, everyone kind of realised they didn't need to, it had made it too simple. It had made it without challenge, and that you could just stick a pipe anywhere. You could have an infinitely long pipe and it provided infinite throughput still. And that was an unintended consequence of the change that they've made. These omnipipes created a situation where pumps never increased throughput, they only ever restricted it. This was counterintuitive, but also meant that you just never used pumps in the network unless it was to disable a specific section with circuit connections. That's referring to, I do this a lot, and I'm sure a lot of players do, where you'll have a tank and you'll have some condition that it says when this is full or when this is empty, turn on or off the pump. They were presumably connecting it up to pipes maybe, but it might just have been the tanks as well, and that's the only case where they were using pumps, because pumps actually, as you can kind of intuit from how Fluids 2.0 was described, they actually restrict flow rather than increasing it, which is, as Wagon says, counterintuitive. Additionally, steering people towards using long pipes everywhere turned out to be a huge trap for fluid mixing, as the chances of accidentally connecting two different pipelines increased significantly. I suppose that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? If you've got just pipes absolutely everywhere, and you suddenly pop in a new straight pipe or a new underground, and it just accidentally connects to the wrong thing, then because of the fluid mixing, it would maybe throw up an error, but there are cases where it does allow fluid mixing by accident. There was quite a good Friday Facts where they talked about how basically one of them was just continuously breaking all of the fixes that they put in, and eventually they just sort of threw their hands up and went, okay, well, you could just allow mixing in these very, very limited circumstances, so we're not going to fix every problem. If this happened from bots constructing something while you were on a different planet, then good luck finding the single incorrectly placed pipe in such a huge search area. And that's a really good point. Remote view is amazing. I put out a video just recently saying remote view is really well executed and really well done. It means you can do anything basically remotely, including setting machines and recipes and all this sort of stuff. So I could well imagine just slapping down loads of blueprints, loads of fluids everywhere, and your bots just build it all. And then you go back to the base and it's all ground to a halt because there's a mixed fluid, and you're just sat there trying to work out, well, what? Constantly flushing pipes and all that sort of stuff to go, well, what's actually coming in first, and where is it connected, and blah, 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 blah. And presumably because of the infinite throughput stuff, just everything would just, instantly fill up all the time. So yeah, I can imagine that would be really quite annoying. It was time to search for solutions. The importance of visual feedback. Transport belts are fun to play with because they are extremely visual and interactive. You can see exactly where items are coming in, where they are going, and where the bottlenecks are, all at a glance. By contrast, pipes are almost entirely opaque, and the tiny windows are not enough to give you sufficient visual feedback. This is part of the reason why we went for a no thought required solution to fluid flow. That's sort of repeating the point that Rhaegar made in Fluids 2.0, and it's entirely true. The pipes, mostly they're underground, they're almost exclusively underground, and, have that little window, but all that does is just sort of show that fluid is flowing and maybe the direction if you look at it closely. It doesn't tell you how full it is, how quickly it's flowing, any of that stuff. And that's one of the reasons that, I really like the 2.0 change, because you're not getting the feedback from pipes, irrespective of how the system is running. If we are to add a limitation to the fluid system, then that limitation needs to be extremely easy, obvious, and interactive. After butting heads for a while, this is what we came up with. So it sounds like lots of people had lots of ideas. Having met a few of the devs, as said at the LAN party, I don't mean that as a boast, it's just, say that chat to a few of them. I could well see why, some of them would have strong opinions and express those opinions extremely strongly. So I wonder there if maybe some of them, were ones that people hit upon or suggested on, on Reddit and stuff like that on Discord, because I know there was a lot of chagrin from the community about Fluids 2.0. As I said, I absolutely loved it, but yeah. Pipeline extents. Pipelines are constrained to a 250 by 250 tile area, and exceeding this limit will cause all flow through the pipelines to cease. You can split a pipeline using a pump. The game displays a visualization to show that the pipe is broken and will generate an alert at the location where you need to place pumps. This makes the problem easy to diagnose and easy to fix. So this is it doesn't quite say it directly, but this is the solution essentially. So what it is that if you have a pipeline that exceeds or goes outside of a 250 by 250 area, then it will essentially say it doesn't work anymore. Okay, we'll watch the video in a second, but the key thing to note there really is it's a 250 by 250 tile area, so it's not 250 pipes long necessarily, because if you imagine a pipe snaking around, it could be more than 250 segments long. It's just when it gets outside of that bounding box. Okay, so that is important to note, because it was a little confusing how it worked at the LAN party. I say this is kind of explaining it, and it is obvious when you really, dig into it. But say we had some, or I was certainly messing out with some pipes that were like, seemed to be massive in terms of weaving themselves around, but it wasn't triggering this problem. Then you'd add one pipe somewhere, and suddenly it would say, no, it doesn't work anymore, because you'd exceeded that bounding box, and it's the bounding box, not the total length of the pipe. So yeah, let's just watch the video. Okay, I'm going to loop it round and show a bigger version. It's not actually all that clear what's going on there. This is the video. Okay, now this is the broken state. Okay, so what it's showing, you see these little red X's and the red lines on the pipes, those are the it is broken symbol. Okay, and this is also kind of stealth revealing that I'm pretty sure this wasn't known. I've sort of been playing with this now for a good couple of weeks, and so I'm sort of used to it, and I forget whether it was known or not. But this is actually based on a mod that Rhaegar did. I think it was Rhaegar. But it's basically one where it's Fluid Visualizer, I think it's called, where it basically shows you what's in the pipe when you hover over it. So at the moment, it's showing you this error message, bright red, it's broken, da 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 da. But when it gets fixed, you'll see it flips to light oil, and these lines become the yellow colour for light oil. It's a really useful thing, particularly around if you've got a pipe that doesn't have anything in it and you think it should. That's a really useful feature to have, to just show, I think this should have petroleum in it, and it's showing it as being empty. Oh, I've not connected the pipe. So it's a really, really useful tool for that. But this is the broken state. Okay. Now, it doesn't show the pop-up, okay, but when it's hovered over, hang on if I can get it to pause in the right place. So when there, it would show a pop-up saying that it'll be like, 252 divided by 250, so it'll basically be saying the total size of this network is over 250, and your maximum size allowed is 250. And so it doesn't show that pop-up, but then that's what clues you in. Oh, right, it's because it's too long. Okay, so then the fix is to obviously break the pipe, put in a pump. You see it comes up the yellow. So it's showing that that's what's in that fluid. And so you've got the yellow on there as well for the sulfuric acid. And this is a little unfortunate in that the heavy oil is also red. I did find that confusing on a particular thing where I was like, oh, that means it's broken. It's not, because it's got heavy oil in it. So I think a slightly different colour tweak would be good there, but it doesn't matter. So yeah, then put the pump in and they see everything is fine and the warning symbol is gone. So yeah, so I say that is how it shows you that the pipe is broken. It has this red X. It doesn't work. Indicator. When you hover over it will tell you how close it is to reaching that 250 by 250 limit, and your solution is putting pumps in. Okay. When holding a fluid-related entity, the game displays connection visualizations of visible pipelines that are tinted to match the fluid inside. That's what I was basically just describing. You can also visualize an individual pipeline by hovering over it with your mouse, in which case you will also see arrows telling you how large the pipeline is. And so here we see the screen capture, and the caption says, "This might look familiar to users of my pipe visualizer mod." So there you go, just confirming. So Rayguard built the pipe visualizer mod, and it's basically the same functionality. Obviously it's more integrated into the engine now, and I think some little tweaks have been added to it. But as you can see here, we've got, for example, the green lubricant pipeline is being highlighted, as well as I think we've got the sulfuric acid there. And it's a really useful tool. As anyone who uses that mod will tell you, it's a really instant way to understand what's going on with your fluids. I forgot to record this line, it appears. So here's some footage of me looking gormless. The text says, "As the final cherry on top, you can also enable a toggle to see pipelines on the map." But yeah, as you can see, it's useful anyway, however you get at it. Because here you can see this pipeline is presumably a broken one. The colouring is really nice because you can just instantly tell the pink is petroleum and the green is lubricant and stuff like that. So yeah, when you're building an individual setup, you still don't have to worry that much about pipe throughput. You connect the pipes and it just works. However, connecting your setups together requires slightly more thought, as now you actually have to worry about directionality and the throughput of your pumping stations. The pump isolated sections also make it much less of a disaster if you accidentally mix fluids. Balance tweaks. In addition to the extents, we have made a few tweaks to the balance of the fluid components. Pumps have been nerfed to 1200 per second, which is a 10 times decrease, but this can be increased with quality. Fluid wagons have been buffed to 50,000, which is a 2 times increase. And now 1 water expands to 10 steam in boilers and heat exchangers. With 3 pumps per wagon, that is 3,600 per second per fluid wagon, or about 14 seconds to fully pump out a wagon's contents. This is much more reasonable than the previous 0.7 seconds you could get in 1.1. This is still plenty fast for vanilla megabases, and in Space Age you can increase pump quality if you need even more throughput to feed your legendary foundries. I always kind of figured that this was like a fudge to get around some of the problems with the fluid system, but basically you used to be able to empty a wagon almost quicker than the trains could pull in and out. In fact, I think it was quicker. It depends a bit on how much braking force and some cheats that you can do, but 0.7 seconds was in the region of it turns up, bosh, gone. It was so quick that you could just move them in and out instantaneously, and of course you could have a big chunk of tanks and it would just be able to push huge amounts in. As I always felt it was a bit of a fudge and a bit of a weird thing that the way it worked. This is changing it so that there's more in a single wagon and the pumps out can suck through less, as it were. So in other words, increased one and decreased the other, and therefore the time taken is a lot longer. But of course there's more total in there, so a single wagon can support your system for a lot longer. It does also mean that a fluid wagon is now able to fill 2 tanks, basically, 2 of the storage tanks. And so, you're going to get less traffic, essentially, for that reason as well, in that, when they pull up and try to fill a tank, then, they would have to go back and several trips just to do it once. And now 1 can fill 2, which is kind of that common arrangement of having 2 tanks, being fed by the thing. You can obviously do all sorts of different ways of doing it, but... So yeah, so I think this is, there is also this hidden reason going on here somewhere, which is basically that, you got the foundries using the liquid metals, and it was kind of massively powerful no matter what. This just puts in a little bit more of a wrinkle for having enormously powerful machines being fed infinite resources. So effectively this is giving a little bit more balance to that, and it should mean that you need a more sensible system. Because one of the things with that infinite pipe length is you could therefore have hugely long foundry stacks and infinite, enormous nuclear power plants and all this sort of stuff with no real consideration on fluids. And these changes kind of help bring that bit more into balance, so you've got to think about it a bit more. The water to steam ratio change makes it more possible to supply power on nuclear setups using fluid wagons or even water barrels. The change doesn't affect the power consumption or output of any of the machines, they just consume 10 times less water to make the same amount of steam. So yeah, it's also slightly more realistic, isn't it? Steam occupies a much greater volume than fluid water. So basically, as you boil water now, it turns into steam and it creates more steam effectively. So you're actually getting 10 times as much steam by the sound of things, because the amount that those buildings consume of steam is not changing. So every one becomes 10 steam, whereas 10 became 10 before, so you don't need to provide as much water. So, and we also obviously know that, you can put fission reactors at the very least on platforms, and you can get water out of icy asteroids, so is this also a help there? You don't need to process as much water in order to get your nuclear power plants running on your platforms. The extents, combined with these changes, have made the choice between fluid wagons and large pipelines much more varied. Omnipipes are no longer the one true solution to everything. You can still build them, but they require circuits and are far less magical. Will you choose the near-instant transportation of a pipeline, or the enhanced flexibility of a fluid train? Algorithm tweaks. There have been a few changes to the algorithm since it was first introduced. Firstly, the output rate used to be unlimited, but is now inversely proportional to the fullness ratio of the sink. Obviously, it used to just, it didn't have any blocker on it at all. It could just put out as much as it had in it effectively, instantaneously. Now it's inversely proportional to the fullness ratio of the tank. So as that sink, which is the whole system is considered one sink, as that gets fuller, the output rate decreases, which might sound a bit weird. What you've got to remember is that it's fuller sink, so there's more in it. I suppose it's like a sort of a thing of, if you're in a sense, sucking up a liquid, with a straw sort of thing. If there's very little in it, you'll empty it quite quickly. But if it's really full, it'll take a long time to empty. I think that's what that's trying to create. It does sound a little weird. You would expect it to be proportional. The more that's in it, the more internal pressure it has, and therefore it would push it out. But as we've already established, there is no pressure in the game. Secondly, the special exception for a storage tank flow has been removed. So the special exception it's referring to is this one, where it said a special case pumps can pull at faster rate if they are connected directly to a storage tank. So that's gone, basically. So it doesn't matter what a pump is connected to, its pumping rate is the same. The input rate limit used to only apply when pulling from a pipeline, but now it and the new output rate limit are applied to every fluid flow operation, with the exception of fluid wagons. This was this thing about instantaneous infinite transfer. And basically it's saying that there's an input limit rate now and the output limit, and they apply to everything. So you can't have a building that is connected and it pulls infinite fluid per second. It has to work within those two limits, which I think is a good change. Something that I failed to adequately explain before is that while there is no limitation on the total flow through a pipeline in a given tick, there is a hard-coded limit of 100 fluid per flow operation of up to 6,000 per... so because you're getting 60 ticks a second, so 6,000 per second is 60 ticks, so 60 times 100. This limit is multiplied with the fullness ratio of the source and the sink to produce the actual flow value. And this proportionality is what allows machines to share fluid more evenly. Machines that update first will still get the greatest share of fluid, but the difference is much more subtle than it was in 1.1, where the order that you build each pipe entity would greatly affect the flow. I wonder if that's the thing I noticed. So on the previous one, I seem to remember this one. These don't all quite update like instantaneously all at the same time. And I had a thing in my Friday Facts where I was basically saying, there seems to be something still to do with, like flow profiles effectively, or volume profiles or something like that. Because if you look at some of these, well, particularly they don't update at the same time, and there is almost like if you say this is the furthest from that point, because it's all sort of pushing in that direction, these update first and then these second. And I think that's maybe what I was noticing, is this fact that because the machines do update in an order, they're going to pull fluid first and etc, etc. So it doesn't dynamically work out, right, everything connected in this tick and do the maths and blah, blah, blah. They still update individually as you go, which would make, that's how the game works. It goes through things in an order, The output rate limit is particularly interesting because it makes the fluids feel much more like fluids again. Before, a pump could just push fluid in at the maximum 6,000 per second rate until the pipeline was 100% full. But now it slows down as the pipeline fills, so as if there was back pressure, basically. For each pipeline, there is a certain fullness ratio where the output and input rates equalize, and the level of fluid in the pipe oscillates around this point as the machines do their work. So I say it's sort of balance it up as if it had a pressure, and that it's trying to push this fluid in and it can't put it in because it's so full, and so therefore there's a backwards pressure out. So I don't quite get the whole output inversely proportional thing. Again, if there's pressure in a pipe system, it would force the liquid out. It wouldn't slow down its output. But I guess it just works, in the way that they intended, basically. And here we just see a little video, and it says pipe fullness shown using the debug view. So these are one of the debugs that you can turn on. As you can see, it's even more pronounced, that effect that I was talking about, where basically you notice these, when this train pulls up, if we can get it to loop round again. So you notice these are quite full, and a lot of this is sort of empty. As it starts to push in, you see it fills up these ones first. So this one's now full, but these aren't quite full. So it does have a bit of a profile to it, and it's because these are being updated first and these second. But also there does appear to be this effect. So these are completely empty, the tanks. And now as it's pushing in, you can't really tell the rate that it's increasing. But presumably it's not, it's non-linear basically. So it's sort of saying, as this is getting fuller and fuller, these are struggling to push the fluid in. And presumably, the same is applying to that. Never quite done. The pipeline extent system and balance tweaks were in place for the LAN party, and the reception to them was pretty positive. It has been a long, long journey to get here, and there is still so much to do and so much to tell you about. What you see is the system as it will be when 2.0 launches, but I will continue tweaking and iterating on it in the future. I would also like to take a moment to thank everybody for their exhaustive feedback on the previous post. Rest assured I read every single comment, even if I don't respond to most of them. Your passion is a huge part of what makes Factorio such a great game. As always, pressurise your thoughts and pump them into their usual places. Okay, so do I have any kind of reaction on this? I guess I do get these problems. I don't think I would have ever ended up doing this, because it just seems like a massive faff. I'd much rather have a train system doing fluids, but that's like if you're playing in an optimal way, you're going to end up with, just massive fluid buses. I would one of the things I would say is there are some weird things on this, some of these images that you might want to take a look at if you're thinking about doing your own speculations, some things you might not have seen before, or you might not realise kind of what they are. So yeah, do have a good look at the images. Obviously I'm not going to do any of that speculation again. Overall, I like the tweaks. I particularly like that it brings pumps back in. I have been in my builds, something I did use was a big bus in my sort of playthrough, and it was interesting to have. You basically have a great big long extent of pipe, and every so often you actually have to put pumps in, which feels a bit more realistic. You didn't actually have to sort of bother doing that as such, really, on the old game, because of how it did. You just needed to make sure you put stuff in. I mean, eventually you would need pumps, but this feels like a nice compromise, and you get sort of decisions, right, well, if it is just a great big line of pumps in a fluid bus, then how often do you put those pumps? Because although you want, 250 as the maximum, do you instead, put them more frequently and then just have the break-offs, the branch-offs, you don't put pumps on? Whereas what I found I preferred to do was, you need them every 250 anyway, but then I would put a pump on every single one that was coming out. And that way, I could also control it, and I could say, right, well, don't pump if there's nothing in the pipes or what have you. So I do like this change that it reintroduces pumps as being really like a proper thing. In the previous version, they did seem to have just basically become pointless. I really do like the buffs to the actual wagons as well, making those twice the size, particularly with how useful and how good molten metals are with foundries. That, I quite like the idea of sending the molten metal around, to the foundries via train and stuff, rather than pumping it all and sending it via pipes. So yeah, I quite like that. My overall reaction then is very positive. I don't think I've really got much else to say. Having played with the system in the beta, it really did just work. It was really always the stations where you were unloading and unloading fluid wagons, where you'd end up with really weird things that just didn't make sense about, well, it's loading it here but not loading it here, I don't know why, let's just stick in pumps and see if I can fix it. All of that stuff seemed to go, basically. It just didn't seem to matter. And so I really did like the new system. Yeah, so I guess that's it. I say not a lot to speculate on this one, which was quite nice for me because I'm actually away this weekend, so it's nice to have one that I should be able to get done and dusted in a short amount of time. Just to cap off then, another little promo. There'll be a link at the top of the description to a Q&A blog post that I've done. So the idea of that is that you can put in any questions that you want answered about Space Age, and I will do a video and almost certainly a live stream as well for sort of later comments and ones that I couldn't answer at the time. And that'll go live on the 14th. So the embargo lifts currently with the release date for the 14th of October. The exception will be the end game and the final planet. Please put the questions in, but I will not answer them until the week after. The embargo comes with a kind of a request not to talk about the final planet and end game, and I am going to be respecting that request. So I will not talk about those until the 21st, the launch day. I'll probably do it as a separate video, just so that it's covering everyone else's questions off. But I say, if you do have questions about the end game, about Aquila, it also allows you to avoid proper spoilers. That's why that request is there, so that you don't have to worry too much about, because if you've been watching these Friday Facts, you know quite a lot about of the various planets. So I think the assumption is that will probably mostly be spoiled. It won't. There's a heck of a lot in there you don't know about, but certainly the last planet, the end game, they've basically said almost nothing about, and so that's why that request is there, so that if you want to go into those fresh, you can do. Please do put your questions in there if you want answers to them. I hope you enjoyed today's Friday Facts video and might consider coming back for another one. If you'd like to chat about the Friday Facts, then you can find me live streaming Factorio every weekend over on my Twitch channel at Trismegistus. Thanks for watching. Cheers. Am I over, okay, yeah, okay.